Looking for NFL football? Stop right here. You found your home for weekly NFL talk and fantasy football. Coming to you live from the backuppunter.com. This is the Backup Punter Podcast. Now, here's your host, the man who thinks fullbacks win championships, Keegan Matheson.
Everybody's injured. Everyone in the NFL is hurt right now. Week 8 was body bag week, and if you're anything like me, you are now going to the waiver wire, wearing a black suit in mourning for the state of your current roster. This is the Backup Punter Podcast. My name is Keegan Matheson here with you for episode. I don't know what number episode it is. If you listen along, hopefully you know, and if you don't subscribe already, please feel free to do so at iTunes, on Stitcher. You can also follow along on YouTube and reach out over Twitter. I know a podcast is me talking at you, so make it a conversation. Bring it back the other way. Hit me up at the Backup Punter on Twitter. Any questions you might have. Fantasy football, regular football, baking, recipes, whatever you got, hit me up. As always, this show is brought to you by the great people at DynastySportsEmpire.com Fantasy Sports. So whether you're into NFL, NBA, NHL, or, well, no longer Major League Baseball, hit up DynastySportsEmpire.com. They've got you covered. Fantasy Leagues content, rankings, projections, more. They're your one-stop shop. So visit them online. It's DynastySportsEmpire.com. That is DynastySportsEmpire.com. So this week, we have a lot to talk about. Some stuff I had built up from last week that I wanted to get to, and we didn't. And then a little that happened this week, too. And as I said, it was body bag week in the NFL. You look down the laundry list, you've got Le'Veon Bell, Steve Smith, Matt Forte was down with an injury. Ryan Fitzpatrick, my boy, out with an injury. You go around the league, looks like Reggie Bush might be done for the year. Kyrie Robinson. I saw a lot of legs bend in ways that were very uncomfortable this week. And I know nobody likes that. Obviously, nobody likes that, but particularly myself, it's my thing that I can't handle it. And, it goes back to, I'm trying to think of some of these injuries, like Marcus Lattimore a couple of years ago at South Carolina. Kevin Ware, is that the basketball player's name, who landed on his leg and his leg exploded? For whatever reason, I must have seen something traumatizing as a young boy, but for whatever reason, these things just get me. And I mean, I was up late Sunday night. It was especially Le'Veon Bell's. I'm glad that his is apparently just an MCL injury. It is being reported he'll be out for the remainder of the year, but when you look at the replay, it looked like it could have been a serious break or a complete shredding of all the ligaments in the knee because it bent in a strange direction. So there will be updates on these, and just for the sake of framing, this podcast is being recorded on Monday for an early Tuesday release to get out ahead of your waiver needs. So one piece of advice over everything else this week. Stay tuned to the injury news, whether you download the Roto-World app or you just keep up to date on Twitter, follow the right guys, but you are going to gain an advantage this week over your opponents in your league if you are checking injury news. Just by doing that, you'll get the inside edge because you'll see, well, this running back isn't going to come back. Well, boom, grab his backup. And I'll give you a few names that you should watch for later on. So it was another whatever week of football. And if you listen to this podcast, I'm sure you can sense it, but I almost feel myself falling out of love with the 2015 NFL season. We sent another stinker to London. The Lions, if I think they need to be folded, at least rebuilt. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. But it was another weekend of really Bush League football. Even the Packers looked bad. I watched a lot of the Rams game because I am a Todd Gurley superfan. There were 21 flags in the first half of the St. Louis Rams game. By the time that first half was over, most of the other games were well into the third quarter after their own halftime. Just sloppy. A lot of it comes down to quarterback play. A lot of teams are struggling to find their quarterbacks, and there's a 100 different reasons. But it was a kind of walking uphill through mud. It was slow going. It was a sluggish day of football, but there were some gems in there. And I'll tell you one thing that I did this Sunday, and it's something I'd recommend to you if you have the option. You know, if you are one of these people with 10,000 channels on your television, or whichever way you choose to quote-unquote stream your legal NFL content. What I did is I watched the Sky Sports stream from overseas. I guess it's British or English, whatever the proper title is for Sky Sports. And it was still the American coverage, of course, the American commentators, the Fox Sports robots, and all that crap. But in between, the commercials and the in-studio analysis was the Sky Sports people. And it was fantastic. It made my day a hell of a lot better, to be honest, because there was no ex-players just spewing out the same crap, and there was no Michael Irvin, Mike Dick, those types of guys just yelling over each other. There was no carnival barking. It was, and I guess from their market, they are still trying to grow or explain the game from a more analytical standpoint, because in the United States, in Canada, North America, the NFL can put out any crap at all, and people are going to gobble it up. Which is why I sat there watching 14, 16 hours of pretty crappy NFL football on Sunday. But in other markets, international markets where the league's trying to expand, I have found that those TV productions, generally speaking, there's outliers to everything, but generally speaking, they are much more entertaining and much more satisfying if you are a dedicated football fan. A lot of the American coverage is just kind of catered to the fringe person who's watching it as a source of entertainment. But the Sky Sports feed treated it as a sport, which was absolutely bizarre to me, but very welcome. Check out the Sky Sports feed if you do get a chance. And I promise me they're not paying me in a tea or pounds to say that about them. So what else do we need to talk about this week? We will get to those injuries a little bit later. It was a tough week. Especially a guy like Steve Smith, one of the ultimate good guys in the game, headed for retirement. I don't believe for a second now that he's going to retire. I can't believe that. I don't think Steve Smith is going to be the guy that allows an injury to put him out of the league. I really don't. The Ravens would welcome him back if he does want to, and I think he's going to try. He has to try, and he's still got the game. A guy like Matt Forte, how serious is his injury? If it is serious, is that it for him with the Bears? Healthy or not, this is probably it for Forte with the Bears. Then Le'Veon Bell, another season cut short here for him. It's tough. And I heard one analyst make a good point that Le'Veon Bell does put himself in a lot of positions of contact. He's not a shifty speed runner who's blasting it outside all the time. He is a patient runner, but maybe to a fault. He's always involved in contact, always involved in the play, and is that going to wear on him throughout his career? We'll find out, but it's a tough one. Some people did return from injury this week. Speaking of which, on the Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger returned. I struck a deal for Roethlisberger in one of my leagues. I had dedicated myself to Sam Bradford in this league like a fool from the start of the season. Like a lot of people, I thought he was going to do good. He didn't. End of story. So a couple weeks there, I rode the waiver wire. Earlier in the year, I had some success with Tyrod Taylor. And heading into this week, all I had was Alex Smith. Hey, probably should have kept him because he played like Michael Vick on Sunday in London. London is just going to think that the strangest players are NFL superstars. They really are. But anyways, I didn't want to start Alex Smith, obviously. In hindsight, I should have, but nobody would have said that going into the game. So I made a trade for Ben Roethlisberger. I traded Eric Decker straight up for Ben Roethlisberger, and I could afford to. I had some wide receiver depth, Julio Jones, Keenan Allen on that team. both of them. Who else do I have? Jordan Matthews, Devontae Adams. So I thought I could afford it because I've got some great running backs too. So this was my first trade of going for it. And Jesus, did Ben Roethlisberger look bad. He didn't get any skinnier over the injury time either. It was noticeable. But Ben Roethlisberger didn't look good. And now that Le'Veon Bell is out, well, how's that going to hurt him? He did okay. Roethlisberger did early in the season with DeAngelo Williams out playing instead of Le'Veon Bell. And he's got Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, Marcus Wheaton, and Heath Miller, who I think is going to be important himself, Heath Miller. He'll do fine, but a lot of people were really banking on that as a season saver, including myself, I will admit. So another fallout from these injuries could be a bit of an impact on the trade deadline in the NFL. That's coming up this week. And there has been, I'll call it a strange amount of buzz around this. And that's one part of the NFL that's hyped up a little bit more than it ever should be. Trades, especially the trade deadline. I was looking at the numbers. I think over the past handful of seasons, past several seasons, 5, 6, 7, I think their average is about 1.5, so 1 or 2 trades ahead of the trade deadline. And to be honest, if I'm projecting anything, you'll probably see a depth linebacker, or you'll see a depth receiver just tinkering stuff like this. But the rumors are large. Seattle's out there looking for offensive line help, but I'll use this as an example for why stuff doesn't happen. The report is that Seattle is looking for offensive line help, and they're willing to deal some of their depth receivers. Well, this isn't an affront to Seattle, but who would rather a Seattle Seahawks depth receiver than their starting offensive lineman? Stuff like this doesn't make sense. And in baseball, in basketball, you see teams that are a lot more willing to just gamble. Say, you know what? I'll overpay a little bit because I need this. Or, you know what? Let's make an even deal and just risk it. See where the dice lands. That doesn't really happen in football. You're not going to see big, risky trades too often. So stuff like this, teams only want to spend a depth receiver. They only want to spend a 6th-round draft pick in 2018. That's not going to get anything done. The Cleveland Browns are rumored to be flirting with a fire sale. Now, in any of these deals, they'd have to eat a lot of money, which would really negate a lot of it. But anyways, they're looking to trade, potentially, Joe Thomas, their left tackle, Alex Mack, their center, outside linebacker Paul Kruger. Had a good year last year, not having a good year this year. That's difficult. Are they going to make a move that would signal another complete rebuild, I guess, of sorts? Has Cleveland ever totally rebuilt? I don't know. They've always been a step above rebuilding, which is dangerous. There's also a rumor they want to try and trade Barkevious Mingo, who not long ago was a very high pick of theirs, and he hasn't done a damn thing. So that was a kind of a hilarious rumor in that respect. Maybe a team like Detroit. Maybe they can sell off some pieces. If they can eat some cash and pawn off Haloti Ngata on someone, maybe. I think that, it's not going to happen this week, but I think that Calvin Johnson will eventually be traded before the end of his contract, which is about to turn into an ass-ugly contract for the Lions. It's going to hamstring them. My dream is Calvin Johnson playing with Tom Brady. I'm selfish, and I want to see that. I've lived through the Tom Brady-Randy Moss years, and I want to see that again. I do, as a selfish football fan, so we'll see. But there are so many teams, like the Lions. The Steelers looked like this the other day. I guess the San Diego Chargers have occupied this role for so many years. Teams that are in the middle, that are way too talented to blow it up. Look at the Lions roster. There's so much damn talent on that Detroit Lions roster. It doesn't make sense to blow it up when you look at it. And especially when you consider the jobs of head coaches, general managers, front office people. They don't have time to blow things up. This isn't baseball where you can stock up on prospects, because there's not really such thing as prospects. At least in baseball. Let's compare it like this. Let's take the New York Yankees and the New York Jets. If the New York Yankees this year say, I'm going to rebuild, then they trade away their great pitchers, their great hitters, and they get some blue-chip, elite prospects. The fan base can look at that, ownership can look at that and say, oh man, those guys in a few years are going to be superstars. We are going to come on the upswing fast because we have talent in the system. That's a good thing. The general manager, the bench manager, they might be able to survive that, maybe, if it's handled correctly. So let's look over to the New York Jets in this hypothetical. Let's pretend the Jets want to rebuild. So they pawn off all their good players. They trade Revis, they trade Sheldon Richard, they trade all of these good players. Well, now they've just got draft picks. And that's tough. That's going to turn into another D. Milliner, a guy that doesn't matter. And even if you can find young talent from other teams, a team isn't going to trade you their Amari Cooper. A team isn't going to trade you Todd Gurley or Stephon Diggs or anyone like this. That's not how the NFL works. It's not. So you see how it's so much harder for an NFL organization to hit reset? Because it makes the team go back to square zero, but without anything else to look at. Stick with me on this obscure example here, but when the New York Yankees rebuild and go back to square zero, they can look at their prospects. When the Jets go back to square zero, they've got to tell ownership, a fan base, listen, trust us, we're going to figure this out fast. And that results in people losing their jobs. So there's a lot of teams in the middle like that. They're too talented to blow it up, but they're not going to win the Super Bowl. And they're not going to come close at all. Look what the Denver Broncos did to Green Bay on Sunday Night Football. Aaron Rodgers passed for 77 yards. In most games, he throws a 77-yard pass, but they made the Packers look like a Division II team. Don't tell me that a team like the Lions or Chargers, don't tell me that they're even serious, that they can ever even imagine they're going to compete with a team of that caliber in the next couple of years. It's ridiculous. So if they want to compete with that team in 4 years, maybe, it's time to rebuild. That's why I like what the Bears are doing. Even though they're only getting late-round picks, some spare parts, they're at least recognizing, hey, this isn't the roster we're going to win with. And it's a brave move. It's one I like. One I like a lot. I do. So let's look around the rest of the league. A couple things that happened this week. Then I'm going to talk about, believe it or not, on the Backup Punter podcast, I, Keegan Matheson, I'm going to talk about another thing the NFL has done that pisses me off. But whatever. Looking around the league, I did just touch on the Chargers there. I was encouraged this week to see Melvin Gordon getting a lot of snaps. He didn't produce much, barely eclipsed 3 yards per carry. But this was a big week for Melvin Gordon, and I took a speculative ad on him in one of my leagues, actually, just prior to kickoff on Sunday, just to stash him on my bench because, don't forget, this guy was the 17th overall pick for a reason. San Diego moved up a little bit to get him. They have big plans, okay? Danny Woodhead is an aging guy who is not a 20-30 carry guy. If Melvin Gordon even shows the smallest bit of aptitude, he's going to get the bell cow carries here. Maybe not the passing downs, but the carries. And he did on Sunday. Now, he didn't do much with them, but that was an encouraging one. You're going to see some owners in your leagues dropping Melvin Gordon. I'd suggest making that speculative ad, because maybe by week 10, week 11, week 12, they say, listen, this season is lost, or maybe, listen, we need a spark. Something's going to happen, and the Chargers are going to say, give Melvin Gordon the rock. Throw it to him, hand it off to him. Let's see what we have in this guy that we invested so highly in. So I like that. And then, of course, the Oakland Raiders continue to impress. Michael Crabtree is playing like the player Michael Crabtree thinks he is, which is great. Good on Michael Crabtree. Amari Cooper is great. Derek Carr is growing on me. I wasn't a believer in him. I was not entering the season. I needed to see a lot more because in 2014 I felt like he was not given a free pass, but if he had have put up that rookie year in Green Bay, people would groan. But since it was in Oakland, since they haven't seen good quarterback play, it was, oh, wow, look at this guy. I didn't buy into it. I'm starting to now. Fantastic arm. And I really like his pocket presence. So the Raiders, believe it or not, I think they're legit. Looking around the rest of the league, as I consume a little more coffee so we can both stay awake through this podcast. Don't let me put you to sleep here, because we're going to talk about the New Orleans Saints and the New York Giants. Drew Brees, 511 yards, 7 touchdowns. Eli Manning, 350 yards, 6 touchdowns. It was a gong show. There was no defense at all, and it looked a lot like a Madden game set to easy or arcade mode. And I don't know where I stand on this, and I want to hear what you folks all think about this game. Was this a good game or a bad game? Good or bad? Saints versus Giants. I want you to let me know on Twitter, @TheBackupPunter. Tell me what you thought about this game, because in some places, the articles, the coverage I saw was just kind of trashing the defense. This was backyard football. In other places, this was, oh wow, the game of the year. In my opinion, this was, if you've listened to this podcast, you know that I think the NFL is just kind of turning into an action movie. It's just lots of fireworks and stuff, but not the type of football that pleases me. The strong running game, strategy, stuff like that, good defense, strong secondaries. That's why I'm really starting to like a team like the Rams. I don't think Jeff Fisher's the best coach in the world by any means, but they are running the rock, playing good defense. And maybe I'm old school. Is that the right word? A football purist? That sounds kind of arrogant. I don't want that to be the word. But you know what I mean. These are the things that I like. And this big explosion, I bet Roger Goodell, the NFL, are just licking their lips right now, because that was a good TV game. It was entertaining. This is the National Football Entertainment League, the NFL. It's like WWE. But in terms of just being a football fan, I flicked over and I watched the end of the game. It was garbage. It was exciting. It was highlight-filled, but the moment the ball went in the air, you just kind of think, okay, here we go. It was like a CFL game or an Arena League game. It was a little bit much for me, but a lot of people loved it. So let me know what you think about that. I know I'm just being crabby. I'm being salty here. So let me know what you thought about that one. And then, before we get into studs and duds and waivers, we'll do that quickly because we're going on long here already. I do want to touch on something that came out just after last week's podcast. And this is, installment 455 in why the NFL is an absolute shit organization, period. Now, I'm sure you all heard, last month, October, is Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the NFL, and which is a fantastic thing. The league is using its platform to do some stuff that is good. Now, there's been a lot of reports that the money isn't going where it's supposed to go, that type of stuff. And unfortunately, with these breast cancer awareness campaigns and many organizations, there's often some unsavory stuff, controversy. Do your own reading on that. The Komen Foundation, some stuff like that. It's unfortunate, but for the most part, the NFL has brought it to the forefront. And if you're going to have a big, ugly platform like pro football, do something with it. So, okay. DeAngelo Williams comes out. And this has already happened with guys like Cam Hayward writing, honoring his father with something on his eye black, getting fined for it. But this stuff here just, these were two cases that I'll highlight right now that they didn't just annoy me. I mean, you see something like Joseph Randle getting arrested, Greg Hardy slapping a clipboard out of someone's hands, and you're annoyed. It's like, oh, come on, here we go. Here's the NFL. Here we go again with the NFL. But these are two cases that they pissed me off. They did, like, outside of football, outside of football fan Keegan, real life Keegan, just normal Keegan, walking around the house, drinking coffee, not thinking about football. It pissed me off. First off was DeAngelo Williams, who is a huge advocate for this cause because he lost his mother to breast cancer. On his eye black, he wrote, "We will find a cure," and then there was a pink ribbon written onto his eye black under his eyes. And to be honest, it looked kind of nice. As long as you're not doing something stupid on your eye black. I kind of liked what Hayward had, what DeAngelo Williams had. A little message on the eye black, or a team logo, or something like that. As long as it's not a FanDuel ad. He wrote, "We will find a cure," and there was a ribbon on the eye black. This was during October, during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. DeAngelo Williams was fined $5,757. Now, I know that's a drop in the bucket to DeAngelo Williams. That money doesn't matter to him. To him, it's just an issue of principle. But to me, probably to you, unless you're listening to this from high atop your ivory tower, that's almost $6,000. That is, if that fell on my desk right now, that would change not just my day, that would change my month, my year. That would change a lot about me. For DeAngelo Williams to be fined almost $6,000, $5,757 for writing "We will find a cure" on his eye black and including a pink ribbon to honor his dead mother is, you know what it is. And then another instance, the other one I want to highlight, William Gay. William Gay's mother was killed in a domestic violence incident. He lost his mother because of domestic violence. So he wore purple cleats to honor domestic violence. Just as pink is the color of breast cancer awareness, purple is what's associated with domestic violence awareness or any of those causes. Purple is traditionally that. So he wore purple cleats, and they weren't flashy, stupid diamond cleats. I actually read that they were standard issue Minnesota Vikings tweets. So they were licensed NFL cleats, sponsored everything, just for a different team that he was wearing with his uniform. So William Gay wore these to honor his mother, who, like I just said, and I've got to hammer it home, to honor his mother who was killed from domestic violence. He was fined $5,757 as well. And what the heck? And like I always say with this stuff, it's the same as the Greg Hardy, the Ray Rice, all this stuff. You don't need me. You don't need some old white sports writer man to stand on a moral high horse and say, this is wrong. Everyone knows that, okay? You don't need me to sit here and give you a life lesson, because if you're taking life lessons from me, then you've already probably gone past the point of no return. Don't do it. But it's time to start thinking critically about the NFL. Like I said a little earlier in the show, a lot of us have gotten to the point with the National Football League where they could put out two Pop Warner teams on the field, a bunch of 6-year-olds, and if they called it NFL football, we would show up, drink the $10 beer, buy the $200 jerseys, scream, buy the cable packages, download the apps, use their fantasy football, play FanDuel, just because it's called the NFL. Something being called the NFL doesn't matter to me anymore, and that's quite frankly why I, like I said, falling out of love with it. We're going through a phase, me and the NFL. So maybe that's what this podcast is going to be about a little bit more going forward. Not just fantasy football and NFL football, but my relationship with the game that I do love, that I have loved, but it's in situations like DeAngelo Williams and William Gay. These are things where this has happened for years. These are just two that I'm choosing to highlight. This has happened for years, stuff like Ray Rice, Greg Hardy, all that stuff, Joseph Randle recently. This has happened for years. And it's horrible to admit, and I hate to admit it, but me, just like you, like a lot of people, and I don't want to say you, I'm not going to paint you with the same brush as myself, but we'll say a lot of people. There's the initial outrage, and then it dies, and then nothing happens. Around and around it goes with the NFL. To be honest, that's kind of already happened with Ray Rice. With Adrian Peterson, those have pretty much burnt out. The outrage is gone from them. And it's not been forgiven, but it's been forgotten. And I'm not saying we need to carry this to our graves daily, talking about how much we hate these guys, but with incidents like this, it's important to think critically. And I've hit the point where I don't just look at this and say, well, I guess that's just the bad side of the NFL. You have to take the bad to get the good. Why the hell does there have to be a bad side with the NFL? Now, every sport has their idiots, of course. Every sport does. There are terrible people play pro baseball. I guarantee it. Look at any professional soccer league around the world. There are some horrible people in that league. Basketball, terrible people. Some of them in that league. That's a human law. It's not sport specific. The issue I have with the NFL is that the league can be terrible. That the league can lack some of this moral compass, some of this moral goodness that other leagues don't really lack so obviously. And stuff like this, DeAngelo Williams, William Gay, $5,757 for honoring their deceased mothers, not with some great on-field display, not with some message that distracts from the game, not with an action that limits the on-field product in any way, but with a decoration on their face and a different colored shoe. The NFL is a goddamn joke. And now we're going to flip it and talk more about the NFL. Does that make me the problem? Probably does. Think about it. Let's get into the studs and duds. I'm not going to transition. I just want a quick change. I want to get into some fantasy football talk and get away from that. I won't drag your day down, but think critically. Jesus. So let's get into studs and duds. And let's look back at the week that was by the players. Probably by players who are, for the most part, good people. Let's look at Drew Brees. QB1 on the stud team. Just so you know, I'm not painting this whole league the same way. QB1 on the stud team. Drew Brees, he is a Hall of Fame human being. A great person who deserves good things to happen to him, and that happened. We talked about him just a moment ago. 511 yards, 7 touchdowns, and a pick. Whew. And I'm glad they won that game, too. I would have hated to see Drew Brees put up that effort and have a Rob Ryan defense torpedo it, like a Rob Ryan defense can do sometimes. Wide receiver 1. We don't need to leave that game. We're going to look at Odell Beckham. Y'all know I don't like him, but I can't just wipe him off my lists. 8 catches, 130, 3 touchdowns. Great game. Tavon Austin, wide receiver 2 on the stud team. 4 catches for 98 with a touchdown. 3 rushes for 21 and a touchdown. I'm in love with Tavon Austin. I think him and Todd Gurley are going to grow old together. Or at least grow to like age 28 before one of them falls apart because the NFL. But hey, wide receiver 3 on the stud team. Back to the big game, Brandon Cooks. 6 for 88 and 2 scores. This was a big one. Brandon Cooks was a high draft pick for a lot of people. 3rd round. Is that a good place to where a lot of people drafted him in a standard 12 team? 3rd round or so? Maybe 4th. Brandon Cooks, he was a quiet man early in the year, but picking it up. RB1, who the hell else? Todd Gurley, 20 rushes, 133 and a touchdown, 3 catches for 13. This guy is the real deal. He is my number 1 fantasy player in football, period. RB2, Charkandrick West. I'm glad that he's caught on, and I'm glad that Andy Reid is giving him the full workload. Not one of these back and forth things, almost like we're seeing with C.J. Anderson, Ronnie Hillman, even though that's working. But Andy Reid is giving his guy the rock. 20 carries, 97 yards, and a touchdown, 4 catches for 25. Tight end 1, back to the big game. Ben Watson, his 2nd appearance on this list. Who would have thunk that? 9 catches, 147, and a touchdown. Remember all that preseason hype around Josh Hill? No. And then the defense of the week, the Houston Texans. How about that? 6 points allowed, 7 sacks, an interception, and 2 fumble recoveries. They almost played football like they got embarrassed last week. and were slightly motivated. QB1 on the dud team, Aaron Rodgers. I don't want to talk about it. RB1 on the dud team, Amir Abdullah. 1 rush for 3 yards. 0 touchdowns, obviously. 2 targets for nothing. Jim Bob Cooter, their new offensive coordinator, Jim Bob Cooter, made a point of saying they wanted to reestablish the run. Didn't look like it was with Abdullah. RB2, Andre Ellington. 3 carries for nothing. Prior to the game, Bruce Arians had said, you know what, I want to get Andre Ellington more involved. It looked like he was going to take over on some passing downs, get some serious touches in that running game again. Bruce Arians said, this guy's just a sprained ankle away from being my starter again, so I need to get him more involved. I thought about tweeting out that he would be a good dark horse ad to get back on that bench. Glad I didn't, and I sure as hell won't be. Wide receiver 1 on the dud team, John Brown, with the most frustrating fantasy football thing that can happen to an owner. I'm thankful I didn't start him. I started Jeremy Maclin over him. But John Brown was announced active and didn't play a snap. This happened a lot last year. I seem to remember it happening with Julio Jones a little bit, AJ Green a little bit, where a receiver is announced active, but they get to game time and they kind of only play in the emergency situations. They're only thrown to if necessary because they're not at 100%. John Brown killed some rosters. Wide receiver 2, Des Bryant, 2 catches for 12 yards. Matt Castle is a horrible quarterback. He shouldn't be in the league. Wide receiver 3, Mike Wallace, 4 targets for nothing. He's safe to drop, I think, in leagues now because Stephon Diggs is the man, and otherwise they are going to Adrian Peterson. Tight end 1, you know what? There weren't that many bad tight end weeks, but I'll give it to Martellus Bennett. 3 catches for 32 yards. Right around now is when I'd be looking to get rid of him because he is due to go off his annual cliff. And then the dud defense, the Atlanta Falcons. 23 points against, which isn't a disaster if they did anything else, but 2 sacks and nothing else to speak of. Not a good week. So who are we going to add this week? I've looked at my rosters, of course. It was a bad week for me. It was. Lost a league because I faced the person who ranked number 1 in the league this week in points, which happens. Fantastic. Lost a league because I made some dumb decisions, and lost a league because my good players played poorly. There are many ways to lose a fantasy week, and I've experienced all of them. So, you and I, we're going to head back to that waiver wire. If you're looking for a quarterback to stream, I keep saying it, but Derek Carr, he's going against Pittsburgh, not the greatest matchup in the world, especially after what Andy Dalton did, but Derek Carr, he's legit. Tyrod Taylor is due back against the Miami Dolphins. Even if he can get you 15, 16 points as a passer, he might add those few extra points on the ground. And then I can't believe I'm saying it. I don't want to say it. Hey, if you want to skip 15 seconds here, it's a good time. But Jameis Winston against the New York Giants, they don't have a secondary. It's embarrassing in New York right now. And I don't think they're going to create much backfield pressure. Now, the Tampa Bay doesn't have the best O-line, but Jameis Winston, he's shown that he can throw it around. And he might run into those interceptions, but those don't really kill fantasy value. They don't. At running back, one guy I'm going to think about this week is Joique Bell of the Detroit Lions. He was the first running back on in their game in London, and he was running very strong. Strong out of the gate. But then, of course, they had to abandon the running game because they were getting shelled. Joique Bell is an interesting one. Underrated running back. If they give him the football, you got to trust him. DeAngelo Williams, obviously, is the number 1 fantasy pickup in all of football this week. Going down the stretch, he should be a definite top 20 running back, maybe fringe top 15. And to find that after week 8 entering week 9 on the waiver wire is big. Now, if you're in a league like me, someone's kept onto him. You don't have a chance, but if he's available, he has to be added. Jeremy Langford would be an interesting add in Chicago. If Matt Forte is forced to miss any time, Jeremy Langford looks like he'll be next up. He was on Sunday. Talented running back, and Matt Forte has put up a lot of numbers for a lot of years in that role. There are some weapons on the outside, so Jeremy Langford wouldn't be getting a ton of focus from the defense. Worth a look. And then David Cobb of the Tennessee Titans. Their backfield is a five-headed disaster, maybe make a speculative ad for David Cobb. Looking at wide receiver, I've said his name a few times. He hasn't done too much yet, but Kamar Aiken, you've got to look at him. You've got to look at those Baltimore wide receivers because somebody needs to do something. Joe Flacco he can throw. Not the best, but he can throw. Steve Smith's gone. Someone has to step up. Malcolm Floyd of the Chargers. There are some injuries on that depth chart as well. Phillip Rivers likes Malcolm Floyd. 2 touchdowns this week. Brandon LaFell of the Patriots. It's time to get him on a roster if he's not already. And, of course, Tavon Austin. Looking at tight end, one guy that is not getting any attention at all, Jacob Tamme. Jacob Tamme of the Atlanta Falcons, especially with Leonard Hankerson out this week, he was the number 2 target in that offense. Number 2. Behind Julio Jones, Matt Ryan likes him. He likes him in the red zone. And even though that passing attack is screwed up somehow right now, Jacob Tamme is a guy to grab. Jordan Reed, of course, too. If he's still available in your league, you need to roster him yesterday. He has top 5 tight end potential, and I believe that. And then Heath Miller, like I said, with Le'Veon Bell out, that takes away a lot of those short targets from Ben Roethlisberger. Some of those go to Heath Miller. Now, if we want to look at a defense this week, I'll give you a few options, and then I'll give you the one that I'm going to target myself, I guess. The Atlanta Falcons, they were last week's dud defense, but they are facing Colin Kaepernick, they're facing Colin Kaepernick and the San Francisco 49ers, so anything's possible there. The Minnesota Vikings might interest you if you're looking for a streamer. Playing the St. Louis Rams, so they'll have to deal with Todd Gurley, who will probably put up a touchdown or 2, but does Nick Foles scare you? Answer should be no. Jacksonville Jaguars welcome the New York Jets. That's a game that I will look at if Ryan Fitzpatrick cannot play for the Jets. I don't really think Geno Smith is going to ruin anybody's day, fantasy-wise. So the Jaguars might be interesting there. But the one that I'll be targeting, if I can get it, Cincinnati Bengals versus the Cleveland Browns for a few reasons. Josh McCown's banged up. The Bengals are turning the corner on defense. It's the Browns. And Thursday Night Football produces absolute crap football, which is good for streaming defenses. I can always target Thursday night if I'm looking for a big one. Cincinnati might just be that this week. So those are the waivers. Those are the studs and duds. And those are my general complaints about the world, about football for this week. But I hope you've enjoyed. And I know that you don't hit download. I know that you didn't subscribe by accident. And it does mean a lot to me that you do tune in each and every week. If you haven't already, head over to iTunes and do hit that subscribe button. Leave a nice little reply, and I'll always appreciate it. Reach out on Twitter. Again, mentioned it earlier in the show, but tell me what you think about that New Orleans Saints, New York Giants game. Was that good for football? Was that just pure entertainment, or was there anything good football-wise in that? Let me know. And if you have any fantasy football questions through the week, hit me up there. Any questions for the show at The Backup Punter or thebackupunter@gmail.com. So my name's Keegan Matheson. We will talk next week, and here's hoping that all of your punts in life stop on the 1 yard line. Thanks.